of the game to be an on-fire wife and an on-fire mom and an on-fire entrepreneur is I have to invest in myself. I have to invest into this business. So that will help exponentially, is looking at it from a little bit of a different angle.
Welcome back to the Virtual Antics podcast. I am so excited because today I have a very special guest. I have a best-selling author of The Dream I Dare You, business owner, and she's the founder of the Dream Factory & Co. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Can you tell me a little bit about, what you do and how you got started?
Oh man, how much time do we have?
Right?
It's always the biggest question. So a little bit about me is, I'm an entrepreneur. It's always funny when I think about my journey, though. I would have never been an entrepreneur. I fell in love with a man who was an entrepreneur. And the only reason I say that is because so much of where I am today really takes shape in the idea that, where I started 15 years ago, I was a get in the box, addicted to routine, a learned controller, say all the right things, don't make too much of a splash. My journey has been exponentially changed. But today, I run a company that basically helps people walk through limiting beliefs and actually chase the dreams that God has for them in their faith, their family, their career, and their community. I'm a mom of 5. I have 5 children under the age of 9 years old.
Wow.
And I'm an author, just bringing revelation to people through words on paper and watching their lives transform. And we get to do it every day, which is amazing.
That is so cool. Now, you have a lot going on, especially, growing your family. You have the book, you have the business. So how do you kind of juggle the day-to-day life?
I think it's when I let go of balance. I hate that word. I think that it is a Pinterest word that the world is trying to subscribe to us. That's not working. I honestly think that it's leaving us striving and pushing and aiming for something that is not attainable, right? And I think if we think about the idea of balance, right, all of us are like, all right, if I spend this much time with my husband and this much time working and this much time with my kids and this much time with myself, and we're coming up frustrated because if we want to be balanced, we'll never be great. And so when I broke up with the idea of balance and I actually learned about alignment, everything changed. And so for me, it is not about having a balanced day or a balanced schedule. It's about getting aligned with the things that are most important to me and giving those my all every single day. And so the only way that I do this is I've just learned to care more about less. And the things that are the most important that God's really put on my priority list, right, which is always my faith, my husband, my kids, and my career, that's just the alignment in which I live in. And so everything else it's not important. It just doesn't get all of me all of the time. That served me. I wouldn't say it's always the most comfortable, the easiest answer, but I just stopped seeking balance and I just started really putting attention to the things that mattered most. And it's worked.
That is amazing. Because I know that's something, I struggle with as a mompreneur myself is like, we have all these different things, maybe we take care of a parent as well as their children. And then we have multiple businesses, usually entrepreneurs. I always say this, we usually start one business and then we have multiple more. We'll have a podcast and a book because we can't stop. And I feel like that's a huge struggle with women entrepreneurs, especially because we want to do it all. We want to be the best that we can be, but we cannot honestly be the best in every single part of our lives. We would be exhausted, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think some of it is, we hide behind busy. And I think that, one of my mentors says all the time that busy is artificial significance. And it's really true. I think that if we're not careful as people, but I think oftentimes as women too, we start to find our value and our significance by the length of our to-do list, right? The more I do, the more valuable I am. And the more that I can give people, then, the more that I'm appreciated. And so what happens is we start to find our identity in all the things that we're doing, only to be exhausted and burnt out. And I think that part of my journey is a testimony to that. I was I grew up a lot of my life not ever feeling like I was significant. And so when I came into this world dreaming big and all the things, right, I was hiding behind a laundry list of quote unquote big dreams that were just fueling this fear of I'm not significant and I'm not enough and I need to do it all. And so I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I think the greatest idea, right, if we could summarize that is, yeah, I think we need to care more about less. I think that we need to put our eyes on fewer targets, but care more about those targets. And because as you start to chase that one and accomplish that, there will be room, right, to do some of those other dreams. But I think that for me has been a game changer.
That's amazing. Now, when it comes to a business, there's so many different departments, right? It's kind of like what we were talking about. We have our family, we have, our parents, we have our businesses, but then within the business itself, we have our sales, we have our customer service, we have our ops. So how would you handle your business when you feel like you're being pulled in so many directions?
Oh man, that's so good. Again, a lot of my answers are not going to be complex. They're really simple. This is
I
one of my
love that.
favorite
We need
hashtags.
that.
It's simple, stupid, hard. Okay. Like the simple things are the stupid, hardest things to do. Right. And so I think that part of this is, as a business owner, most of us get into business because we have that idea or that vision, but then we realize, to your point, I have all these other details. And so when we get started, I think we have to be able to focus on our highest and best use of our time activities first. Right. So like right out of the gate, most of us are going to the path of least resistance or the reactive, right? We're checking our emails, we're getting on our phones, like we're doing all of the other things, which is why in a year or 2 or 10, we're continuing to not actually progress in the business, right?
Yeah.
Is because I'm not focusing on my highest and best use of my time. And so I think we have to identify first and foremost, what is the highest and best use of my time? And we need to be focusing on those items first, right? John Maxwell talks about this all the day. That's like our big boulders, right? And so I got to focus on my boulders, then the rocks, then the sand, then the water, as opposed to the other way around. And so for most of us, when we get up in the morning, we're checking our emails, we're responding to all of the pings, we're just reacting to our life.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm never going to work on the hard things. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm never going to get there. So I think that we have to be really mindful on what is my highest and best use of my time? How do I focus on that first? And then all of these other little things, how can I do this for the last time, right? Can I hire a VA? Can I outsource? Can I say no? Does it have to be now? Could it be later? Right. And over time that, you start to delegate and grow and things like that. But I think for most, it's just focusing on the highest and best use of your time first.
I think that's amazing, and definitely getting those processes and also putting in automations. So I always usually say you're either going to outsource it or you're automate it. And so always keeping that in mind is huge for growth. I know like within 30 days of starting my business, I had to hire 2 people. I had never been a manager before. I had never been a boss. I was just a brand new mom with a little preemie. And I was like, all of a sudden I'm responsible for all these things. And I think that was, I had to learn how to create SOPs, standard operating procedures, to build those, those systems in place. So that way I could easily hand it off to someone or find a way to automate it.
Well, and it's interesting because I think what happens in that mode is that a lot of times we'll go, well, I don't have the money, right? That's most of them. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. That is generally the biggest thing that I hear from people, whether they're entrepreneurs or not. Like, even if we're just moms, just mom, listen to me, where I don't have the money, I don't have the time. But if you really think about it, right? If we go into business for ourselves and just for the sake of the exercise, we make $100 an hour doing what we do. Well, what we're doing are activities that in theory, to your point, I could hire someone for $15, $20 an hour. And so in theory, if I think about, well, I don't have that money. Well, if I'm doing those activities, I'm actually losing $80 an hour by me doing them. Yeah. And so I think that we have to really start understanding the value of our time, and that, yes, there's going to be a gap. And yes, at first, more money is going to go out the door than is going to come back in. But just like any good investment, right? What's the return I'm looking for? If I hire someone for 5 hours a week at $20 an hour, that's going to cost me $100. But if I'm taking those same 5 hours and I'm working on my highest and best use of my time, I actually just made $500 with 100. So my net is $400. So at some level, we're like, no, you can't afford not to, like you can. And that's the other thing I would say is, as women and business owners, is we're now in the game of investing in ourselves. People don't do a good job of that. We invest in everybody else. We invest in all the other things. We put our money elsewhere, and we don't realize that the name of the game to be an on fire wife and an on fire mom and an on fire entrepreneur is I have to invest in myself.
Yeah.
I have to invest into this business. So that will help exponentially, is looking at it from a little bit of a different angle.
That's amazing. Yeah, because I realized that recently as well. So this past year, I called it the year of Natalie, right? So it was the year it's gonna finally, my youngest is in kindergarten now. So I felt like I could actually breathe a little bit. And although we have our after school programs and we're still really, really busy, I was able to actually get a after school program, which I had to invest money into. So that way I could spend more time on my business. But also I started traveling for business. So I can't tell you, I'm like a changed mom when I come back from those trips. I feel so good. I am more patient with my children. I had a minute for my brain just to relax and think and have fun. And when I come back, I'm like, you know what, guys, let's do this really cool project together. And I'm all invested. But when I was at home 24/7 with the children, I was so drained and I didn't want to be near them at some points. I think all moms go through that point where they're like, I just want to be alone for 30 minutes. Right.
Totally. Well, and I think, it's so interesting is I think, the juggle is real as a mom and a wife and a business owner. And I think it's ever changing, just when we think that we figured it out, the kid does something different, or our husband needs something different, or our business needs something different, and it's ever changing. And I think sometimes what happens is we start to lose ourselves to what's going on around us. We lose our dreams, we lose our fire, right? Our output is greater than our input. And, I say to moms or entrepreneur women that come to me all the time in regards like, how do I do this? And I have to remind them, look, what our world does not need is one more woman putting her dream on the shelf for everybody else. It needs a world full of women who are on fire and alive about the dreams that God's put on the inside of them, because that's what our kids need to see. They don't need perfection. They don't need you 24/7, though we think that they do, right? Like what they need is the example of a woman who's getting up every day on fire, in love, unapologetic, ask for forgiveness, like all the things, like the imperfect, messy, yet committed woman. And to me, that's what's most important.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I actually read a book called Start Ugly, and it was about, just starting. Don't worry about perfecting it, because you're losing time, you're losing content, you're losing your inspiration, and your goals are suffering because you're not starting. You're trying to perfect it before you even start.
It's so good.
Yeah, I love that book. It's by another podcaster, Chris. I can never remember his last name, but it is so good. He actually runs Podfest, which is a really cool podcasting network. But yeah, so his book was absolutely amazing. It actually is how I started my podcast, because I was waiting to have the right mic. I had a mic in the hurricane that my office was completely destroyed. And so I was like, I'm going to wait till I get a new office for a podcast. And here I am in my house so, 6 months later. And, I started Ugly, and I'm forever thankful because all the amazing people I've interviewed and the listeners I've got to meet, and there's just so much value in just starting, right?
It's so good. We call it in our family, we call it awkward until awesome.
Oh, I love that.
And it's so funny because I do a lot on social media and a lot of videos. And to be totally honest with you, I hate it. It's my least favorite part about what I do. And there's a lot that I share in my book and my story around me being a learned controller and also kind of a hider. I've been really scared most of my life. I look bold on the outside, but to put myself out there, there's a lot underneath the surface. And so when I started doing some videos, and I'll never forget my son, he was 8 at the time, and he was like, Mom, that is so awkward. And I was like, Malachi, everything he was like, and then I finally looked up, I was like, awkward until awesome. And so it's really been something that we say as a family of it's supposed to be awkward when you start. It's supposed to be messy. It's supposed to be ugly. You're learning, you're going for it, and so it's kind of been something at home that we say all the time, but it truly is on those hard days when I find myself doing that thing or putting myself out there or giving it one more go, you just find yourself saying, all right, awkward till awesome, ugly till beautiful, you know?
I love that. What a cool lesson you're teaching your kids, right? Because I have a daughter who, is that what other kids would call like the awkward, weird child. She's just in her own world. And it's so beautiful to watch as a mom, just doing her own thing in her own lane and not worrying about what anyone else thinks. And I think it's because we've taught her that being weird is amazing and beautiful and unique. And you don't have to be this perfect. I don't think perfect is actually a relative term, because it's really the eye of the beholder, right? So it's like perfect is different to every single person. So you're trying to be a million different views of perfect, and you're just never gonna be that.
Well, and it's so funny. I'm a firm believer that we will lose ourselves to the places that we're trying to find ourselves, and I think that for a lot of us, my journey too, I'm 2 years sober, and I was losing myself trying to find myself in a glass of wine, right? We can lose ourselves trying to find ourselves in other people's opinions. We can lose ourselves trying to find ourselves in work, even, like what we're trying to find is the essence of what's already on the inside of us, but we're using all of these things around us. And ultimately we're just losing ourselves in those, which is why I wrote this book too, because I am such a big proponent on the idea that our dreams matter and our lives matter. But if I'm so focused on the world around me, I'm going to completely miss the world within me. And I think that has to be our focus, is finding ourselves within, as opposed to all these external circumstances.
I love that. And I'm so excited to read your book. I think it's going to definitely be a really good tool for women entrepreneurs, just because, especially if you're a mompreneur, because I feel like we just struggle so internally and so hard. And I think that your book could definitely be like kind of that comforting best friend. You know what I mean?
Well, be careful actually when you read it, because it is actually not an easy read. It's the brand and the dream, I dare you. And so many people are like, oh, I have big dreams. I'm like, no, you've literally never read the book. You should probably read it. It's going to make you or break you in order to make you, and to be totally honest with you, I wrote this book because yes, I stand before you today. I am living my dream that I had 10 years ago. I am. But that's not why I wrote the book. I didn't write it because it's easy. I didn't write it because it's just, peaches and cream. I wrote it because it was actually really hard. And there was no book out there that actually gives you the framework on how to bridge the gap, and that's the biggest issue, is that what we have and what we want are two totally different things, right? Like our dreams and our reality, two totally different things. And oftentimes, right, what we know at a head level and what we're doing at a heart level, there's a huge thing called what I call the gap. And so for me in my journey, it was learning about the tools to actually bridge the gap. And so this book is a framework that walks someone through where they are to where they want to be, the mental, emotional, and tactical tools to do that. And we've watched thousands, I'm not even kidding, like thousands of lives transform with this framework, but it's not an easy read. So don't read it at bed. It is not an easy read. If you call me crying in a couple of months, I will understand why.
That's amazing. But I think we need that. That's actually brings me back to the best friend reference, because, in reality, if you have that friend, that's the one that, it doesn't let you get away with any type of bull, right? So it makes
good. This will be your no BS friend. Yeah.
Perfect. Yes. And I think we all need that, and especially as entrepreneurs, because I know a lot of people say entrepreneurs, we have a little bit of an ego because we've been doing this on our own basically for so long, and you can't do it on your own. You need the knowledge of others, you need the guidance of others, you need to experience what other people have experienced to really grow in life. And, sometimes you don't realize that you're stuck or you're in that gap, right? So I think that's really cool that you wrote a whole book basically guiding women through that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think a lot of times, I think that the ego can also take a reverse shape, right? And being that the number one thing I hear from men and women is something along the lines of I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough. So we're overcompensating exponentially for a fear that we a lot of times consciously or unconsciously have, which says, I'm not worthy and I won't ever be good enough. And so we're using our businesses as an opportunity to kind of fan the flame or show our worth or show, and that's why we, we are really unfulfilled, or why we can even get to a level of success, but then not sustain it. Right. Or we hit that level financially, or we hit that level, right, from a success metric, but we can't quite break through to the next level. And generally that's because what got me to where I am is never going to take me to where I've never been. So the fear of failure can get me going in the morning, right? Like, I don't want to fail. I don't want to not be good enough. I don't want to be not worthy. And so I'll get up and I'll show you, world, like I'll show you what I'm made of. But then over time, that's exhausting. That is really tiring, and it's not going to keep me going all day long. And that's why I'm proposing this book too. We need a dream that's bigger than this life to live for. I need something that's not just going to get me out of bed in the morning. I need to be running all day long, and not based upon what other people think, but based upon what I can't not do. Yeah. And so this book is designed to also really wake you up to your fire. That's not external motivation or just another coach that tells you, get to the gym and you can do it. Like, we need to be reintroduced to our own fire. That's what this book does.
That's amazing. Well, I'm so happy that you joined us today. Now, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can learn more about our coaching programs at dreamstormwithjulia.com. We actually have a mastermind group that coincides with the book. So it gives people the tools to actually bridge the gap. Because it's one thing to read the book. The book in and of itself will dramatically transform your life. But when you get connected to our community and our monthly growth coaching, takes you to a whole new level. So yeah, you can go to dreamstormwithjulia.com.
Awesome. I'll put that link in the show notes as well. But thank you so much for joining me, Julia. It was awesome having you.
Thank you.